Écoutez, je pense que c'est le cas dans chez tous les organisations, les organismes, agences qui touchent au transport, on est passé d'une problématique de génie routier au début du siècle, il y a 100 ans, jusqu'à aujourd'hui, dans les 20 dernières années, où on a évolué vers vraiment la notion de système de transport intégré, multimodal, où tous les modes de transport doivent trouver leur place, doivent s'intégrer entre eux. Alors, cette préoccupation-là vers le transport multimodal, je pense que c'est un des facteurs clés de l'évolution des choses. Et tout ça a mené, il y a une vingtaine d'années, ou une trentaine d'années, à l'établissement des visions de type développement durable, transport durable, plus particulièrement. Et donc, à la prise en compte plus formelle, et ça, c'est surtout dans le domaine des transports urbains, mais c'est vrai aussi dans le génie routier, même traditionnel, où cette approche plus transport durable nous amène à mettre en considération aussi non seulement l'économie des transports, mais tout ce qui est l'environnement. Ça, on est habitué à ça. Mais de plus en plus, maintenant, il y a les préoccupations sociales qui sont présentes et les facteurs les plus jeunes, si on veut, les plus récents dans l'évolution, dans ce sens-là, on a parlé beaucoup des changements climatiques. Là, on est rendu maintenant qu'on parle même de santé publique en association au transport. Alors, c'est des angles nouveaux qui s'ouvrent pour les gens qui font, en particulier, du travail de planification des systèmes de transport.
Bien, notamment, on a vu une importance avec les années, sur la base de ce que j'en sais, évidemment. C'est une importance qui s'est apportée à d'autres éléments que la qualité de la route, si vous voulez. On a pris un virage vers la mobilité durable, la mobilité sécuritaire. On a tenu compte aussi de l'expérience de l'usager qu'on a sur nos routes, sur nos rues. Et dans ce sens-là, l'ATC a su prendre des virages qui sont intéressants au niveau des changements climatiques, au niveau de tout ce qui est l'aspect de mobilité durable. Aussi, il faut tenir compte, et moi, personnellement, travaillant dans une municipalité, c'est ce virage-là aussi qu'a pris l'ATC entre la route et la rue. Donc, le milieu rural, le milieu autoroutier et le milieu urbain. Et on a vu des comités qui se sont formés avec les années, des guides, dans le fond, des lignes de pratique qui se sont établies à l'ATC, plus variées qu'initialement à la route. Donc, il y a eu définitivement un changement en termes d'orientation. Non seulement un changement, mais aussi on s'est adapté aux nouveaux besoins de mobilité à l'échelle du Canada.
Les champs d'intérêt de base sont toujours les mêmes depuis 100 ans. Il s'agit de toujours donner un meilleur service aux usagers de la route, un meilleur service aux citoyens. Ce qui a changé en 100 ans, c'est les moyens que nous avons pour donner ce service public. Donc, c'est vraiment les nouvelles technologies qui s'en viennent. C'est vraiment les nouveaux moteurs, les nouvelles façons de travailler, les nouvelles façons de faire des chaussées, les nouvelles façons de faire des ponts, les nouvelles façons de répondre à cette demande de transport et de mobilité de plus en plus importante dans nos populations, dans nos sociétés. Le transport est certes la façon la plus efficace de développer une économie et pour ça, l'ATC est un endroit exceptionnel pour échanger, pour être capable de s'appuyer sur les meilleures pratiques.
Looking back a good number of years, there used to be mainly the engineers ran everything. Tech had great foresight in establishing the Environment Council, which I'm a member of, and the Education and Human Resources Council, or whatever its name is now, if it's changed recently, to see, they've been able to see where things are going in the future, that environment will affect roadway construction, bridge construction. There's a lack of people coming into the transportation professional and trying to bring them in. Also, it's the new model for sponsoring. And and in the past, if you, with the money you wanted to, it was just a huge pot of money. Now, if you are really interested in the project, you're going to put the money where your mouth is, to get that project going forward because you believe so much about it.
I've only been with TAC 4 years. I'm relatively new to the transportation industry, having done my engineering in the water resources sector. But in those 4 years, what I've seen influence TAC the most is the state of our economy, both the world and Canada's. And even though Canada has done rather well in the world economy in these last few years, it has still created a lot of pressures on governments and industry to continue to be a leader in the transportation sector.
TAC has definitely evolved. I think in the area that is mostly my focus as an engineer is the area of road safety engineering. So much so that years back there was a realization that safety needs to be taken explicitly, and not only by applying the standards that we have in our menus, but in fact to quantify safety. By doing so, the Road Safety Standing Committee was created in late 1990s, and since then evolved into a fully structured committee to provide the platform that I mentioned before, so that we can look into road safety more so. And I think that has been a real series of evolution in TAC.
Well, again, I think TAC, based on its knowledge base, based on its membership, has been able to evolve over the last 100 years. And I think that's the value in TAC. The membership brings forward the emerging issues. The membership is able to talk about what problems they're facing, what issues they're challenged with in transportation. I think some of the biggest changes have occurred in its membership. It's become larger, it's become a much broader organization with numerous people, a lot of municipalities, the industry, as well as the provinces and municipalities. And so it's grown to the point where there's a lot of emerging trends and a lot of emerging issues. I think some of the past ones that we've seen, climate change, there's been a lot more focus on the environment in terms of how our infrastructure impacts it. There's been a lot of focus in terms of participation, making sure that we contain the membership that TAC has. And I think in terms of just keeping current, providing standards and guidelines and updating those standards and guidelines on a regular basis. And certainly, some of the more prominent documents like the Geometric Design Standards and the MEPTG is the new one, the MUTCD, the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, et cetera, are very good sort of products of TAC.
My experience in depth with TAC only goes back about a decade, so I can only talk about what I've seen. But I think there's really two things that I've seen, again, with a focus more in the urban transportation field. And first of all, that's the acceptance of climate change as a legitimate issue that requires the efforts of the industry to address and to look forward and anticipate problems and find solutions for those problems. And I think that over the last 10 years, government support and enthusiasm for climate change as an issue has risen and fallen at times, depending on economic circumstances, among other things. But within TAC, I think there's been a strong cohort of professionals who have really maintained the profile of that issue and have kept it at the forefront and really worked to make sure that it's now embedded in everything that TAC does. The second main driver that I've seen is an acceptance, increasing acceptance over the last 10 years, that TAC is not just about moving motorized vehicles and trucks and cars, and that we've really given an increased priority and in some cases really given preference now to planning and designing for pedestrians and cyclists and transit users in our urban transportation systems. And that's a really fundamental shift, and I think at a conference like the one we've just completed here in Winnipeg, that it's really evident that those issues are really coming to the forefront and are being taken very seriously by the professionals here, and I think that's a big change that's happened in the last 10 years.
I believe that TAC actually started at the beginning of the last century, so around 1914 to 1917, and at that point the automobile was just starting to come into place, and so a big role that TAC provided was again a forum bringing together the provincial, or maybe at that time it wasn't all provinces, but those agencies that basically were building roads for these new machines that were traveling on the roads. And I think at that point they were providing some technical expertise, like comparisons between the provinces as what to build, how to maintain it, all those kind of things. It evolved from there to, I'll say, a bigger role in that regard, and perhaps going beyond just the roads, but getting into the urban environment. Given that the automobile took off and everybody had a car, how do you then build more local roads, highways, roads of different complexity. And I think that in the early 60s, if I recall, it's almost as old as I am, the Geometric Design Guide first came out, and that was a critical tool, a standard for how provinces should build their roads so that they last long, they can be well maintained, and for us, more importantly, that they connect to each other, because at the federal level, we just want to make sure that the roads are connecting between one jurisdiction and the other. And in fact, I'll attribute this to TAC, because I think in the early days, and probably took several decades, as infrastructure always does, it was one of the premier entities that encouraged the federal government to work with the provinces to construct the Trans-Canada Highway. And so what we have in place today, that ribbon of road across the country, is really a tribute to the efforts of TAC in building awareness of the importance of having a highway system that would cross the jurisdictions, that would be of comparable quality, and that it's still in use today. It's grown, but it's the foundation. And then thirdly, I think in the, I'll say, last 20, 30 years, TAC has evolved. It's still doing what it used to do, but it's branched out into the urban transit environment. As the population grows and cities grow, the road system just isn't enough, so we need commuter rail, we need urban rail, light rail, and even transitways like we have here in Ottawa, and TAC provides an essential forum for the municipal governments to get together, exchange, compare, learn best practices, and work with their senior governments, being the provinces, to make sure that we have a well-connected, seamless, and efficient transportation system. And they have provided essential reference material or research material that supports that effort, as well as ensuring that it can apply or function well in a severe environment like we have here in Canada. So a lot of research work that TAC does is really in support of making sure that that system is resilient.
Well, TAC has always focused on the issues of the day. So in the early days of TAC, I think the issues would have been a little bit more simpler, a little bit more straightforward than today. So the early days, they would have most likely worked on geometric design, road, construction, material science associated with construction, roads and bridges. Today, our focus and mandate has changed as the current realities have dictated. So today, our focuses would, some of the focuses that we'd be working on would be such things as climate change, the hiring and retention of transportation professionals, as well as trades, skilled, non-skilled labor in the road construction, bridge construction industry.
I don't think TAC's focus has changed from those who originally had a vision of putting all those folks with transportation under their portfolio in the same room, looking at the issues that vex the nation. I think the factors that has evolved the organization is public expectation about safety in transportation, the huge technical issues that Canada faces across this nation from coast to coast to coast, and the final thing is the safety issues, the huge expectation on the side of commercial traffic and the rules and regulations, and trying to harmonize all the regions across the nation.
I think one of the major accomplishments is the fact that TAC still exists after 100 years. We've seen a lot of other organizations come and go over the years, so it's really a testimonial of the value that TAC offers its members to be around and able to celebrate its centennial after 100 years. And certainly TAC is widely recognized both in Canada and internationally for the work it does on the technical side. So it's research, it's publications, it's knowledge transfer activities through its courses and seminars. And also TAC has been able to encourage students to enter the profession, careers in transportation over the years, and that is certainly part of this success story.
TAC, I've been involved with TAC probably 15 to 20 years, and what I've seen, the agency has grown, allowed probably more members to come in, particularly municipalities. Municipalities also are a major stakeholder in the transportation sector, and so for them to be at these meetings or in the conference allows another input into how we develop standards. And basically, I think it has grown significantly from where it was probably 10 years ago, and which is good, because now it's allowing additional stakeholders to provide that input to basically have the best standards throughout the country, and allows the industry to also use those standards or use that as a guideline as well.
Well, I think clearly Canada and the world has changed enormously in that 100 years. And back in 1914, when it was founded, the big challenge was roads. This new thing, auto, had appeared, and clearly we had to do something about it. So it was called the Canadian Good Roads Association, with good reason. And for the next 50-odd years, I would say, or at least 40 years anyway, that was the big push. Then, of course, we had a huge depression and a war. Things weren't being done during that time. So there was a big catch-up in the 50s and 60s to build roads. And in the 60s, I think the municipalities, the bigger ones anyway, started to realize that we can't do it all with roads. We can build as much as we want, but the cars are coming on even faster. So we've got to go back to public transit, which they had been doing, of course, in the 20s and 30s with the street railways and trams and so on. So the organization evolved with that and became the Roads and Transport Association of Canada. And during the 70s and 80s, it got more into larger scale transportation, grain and potash and coal and sulfur and air and rail became also important. So that this multimodal thing gathered momentum, you could say, and that was reflected in the change in the early 90s to Transport Association of Canada. But it's interesting, and I think it makes good sense, that the board decided after that we really had to focus, this is in the 2000s now, on the things we do best, which is really road infrastructure and urban transportation in all its multimodal glory. And that has, I think that's a good way to cost effectively serve the membership of the organization.
For the last 10 plus years that I represent the Cement Association of Canada in TAC, I noticed the changes more into the hierarchy of different provincial DOTs. The minister and deputy minister, they tend to be more business oriented, not very technically oriented. So TAC has been spending a lot of time trying to, or energy to justify their existence, and also looking at the dues models and trying to expand into involving more private sectors, but also at the same time continuously to evolve with today's economic environments. Mm-hmm. So I think that is what I noticed the change. One of the other major change I noticed is TAC has also been very active now within the last 5+ years in sustainability, climate change. And one other thing I noticed is the sponsored project models has changed over the last 10 years. And I think the current model, the pool fund sponsored project, is the best, because now you involve not just public sectors, but also the private sectors. Mm-hmm. So you get all the talents together sponsoring the projects. So I think that's what I noticed and that's what I liked. So I'm very happy that I'm able to be participated for the last many years, seeing the continued change of TAC for the best.
Mm.
Communication in the last decade has changed the expectation of the user, and has changed the opportunity for volunteers to work together. Of course, the volunteers from TAC come from every coast, come from the middle of the country. We can't get together face to face. So communication has helped the work of the association, but it has also increased the expectation on behalf of the user. The other thing that's happened is there's a growing need for transportation for pedestrians and cyclists. And this is evolving, and the demands of pedestrians and cyclists are pushing the work of TAC away from the motor vehicle to the other soft users on the roadway.
In the early years, it was all about building infrastructure to get people moving on the vehicles, whether it was commercial vehicles or personal vehicles, to get around the country, provide access to communities as well as to industry. as the country has matured, so has the transportation network matured, and the necessity for TAC to actually mature with it. So we've gotten to urbanization, larger cities growing, congestion caused for it. So TAC has been able to modify their organization with the development of the Urban Transportation Council, as well as and we've always been really cognizant of the environment and the impact of the transportation network on the environment, but it's become even more prominent, and as we've looked at climate change, the effect of climate change, so the development of the Environment Council and how that influences and our work and takes it forward. And as well as the maturity, we've realized that we're only as good as the human resources and the people that are involved in the industry. And so the development of the human resources and education councils that report to the board of directors to bring along people, as well as educating the general public as to the benefits of a strong, vibrant, reliable transportation network.
Well, I've been involved with TAC for roughly 15 years on the Environment Council and its standing committees. And over that period of time, I think we've seen a greater interest in all issues related to the environment, including the social environment, as well as sustainability and the issues that go with regulations and making projects easier to move forward, but at the same time addressing those issues. And of late, climate change has been one of those issues that we're having to address.
Well, TAC has had to, I would say, dramatically evolve the way the transportation industry has evolved over the years, and I think it's been a challenge for TAC, but one that TAC has met quite successfully. Transportation industry has become much more complex than it did even a century ago. It started obviously with roads and the road network and the Trans-Canada Highway, which actually transformed our nation. But the transportation industry has become much more complex, multimodal, and extensive. And I think that perhaps the change that TAC has been able to do to respond to the industry is somewhat reflected in its councils. Obviously, the Chief Engineers Council many years ago was pretty key in helping move the road component forward. But since then, the complexity of our cities has resulted in the Urban Transportation Council, which is dedicated to looking at that urban complex, the urban issues. Certainly the Environment Council, environmental issues have come to the fore, and TAC has responded with a council. There's many ways that they even came when the climate change task force was put in place and climate change came to the force. So I think the structure of TAC has really helped gain its relevancy, or retain its relevancy and its growth in responding to some of those changes in the industry. And I must also make note, obviously, of the Human Resources and Education Council. I'd be remiss if I didn't, to deal with the issue of professionals in the industry, and they've taken a very active role in profiling and addressing that too. So I think as the industry changes, TAC has been very successful in responding to the industry and dealing with those changes, and I anticipate that'll happen going into the future as well.
TAC's key roles have changed over the years, mainly because of the changes in the other organizations. The provincial agencies and so on have downsized a lot, and they don't have as much internal resources to deal with a lot of the issues. I was involved with TAC back when it was set up with the Infrastructure Council, so councils basically ran it. But there was a lot more people attending from each of the agencies and so on. With downsizing and restricted budgets, it started getting smaller, and it became more difficult to get all the provinces and the big cities and so on involved. And there was also a change in senior management of all the agencies. Used to be people that had come up through the ranks, and they'd been part of all the committee work and so on. So they understood the process and the importance of volunteers and getting things done at TAC. That's changed over the time, and having people aware of that and letting them know how important involvement is in TAC's business is probably the key.
Well, certainly, if you go back in time, TAC was a very technically orientated organization, producing documents that were very design and planning orientated and somewhat prescriptive. I do think that over time, of course, the environmental, public consultation, the changing demographics have all changed how we look at these things. And of course, the never-ending search for funding, which has become more and more problematic as time has gone on, I think has changed the focus of the organization a little bit. And you see that in some of the councils that have been created and some of the issues that are being debated within the organization.
From my perspective, again, because I'm on the Education and Human Resource Council, I see a heightened focus on the people side of things as opposed to the technical side has continued, but like I said, I see more of a focus on the people side of things as far as recruitment and promoting transportation engineering as a career, reaching out to the students, trying to establish a network and relationships that way too with a lot of the universities and colleges. So I would see that as being kind of one of what I would see as a major change over the last few years with TAC.